To cut costs, HR sent an email freezing my 30-year pension. They forgot the exit clause in my founder's agreement that stated any adverse change to my compensation triggered mandatory $25 million penalty due in 3 business days. Their cost-cutting measure was about to bankrupt them. I knew the funeral had started when the CFO called the pension freeze a small blip. He said it in the same tone you'd use to talk about a printer jam. Not a word about the 3 decades I put in, building Stratagrowth from 2 folding chairs and a space heater into a publicly traded juggernaut. Not even a call. Just an email. One of those cold HR messages that looks like it got spat out by a chatbot choking on buzzwords to evolving fiscal priorities. Your pension benefits are temporarily suspended pending cost optimization review. No greeting. No signature. Not even a damned comma splice to give it some personality. I sat there in my kitchen, robe still damp from the dryer, toast untouched, rereading the email like it might change. Like, if I stared hard enough, the words would reorder themselves into something human, but they didn't. They never do. And that was the moment, sitting in that dim Ohio kitchen with the refrigerator humming like a sad jazz bass, that I realized they'd already buried me, said their little prayers, tossed in a budget-cut flour, and moved on to appease their private equity overlords. And if you're listening to this and thinking, damn, that's cold, then do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Yeah, I know. 97% of folks just lurk around here, eavesdropping on our chaos without commitment. Toss us a like or a sub. It keeps the team going when corporate decay like this makes us want to scream into our coffee mugs. Alright, back to the slow-motion train wreck. See, this wasn't just any pension freeze. This was my pension. 30 years of Sundays, crises, emergency offsites, acquisitions, firings, recoveries. I was the one they called when vendors walked, when data centers burned. Our first COO tried to expense a yacht, and we had to plug a $6 million hole overnight. I never asked for the spotlight. I like being the scaffolding. Unseen but essential. And now I was just omitted like a typo. Like the past was an inconvenience to their spreadsheet, but they'd forgotten something. After that email, I stood up, opened the cabinet above the fridge, the one no one ever looks in because it's where old warranties and dead pens go to die, pulled out a thick black binder. The front label had yellowed with time. E. Carter Founding Docs. I blew off the dust like I was waking the dead, flipped past the incorporation filings, original team bylaws, early equity splits, and then I found it, Clause 14D. I'd written it into my founder's agreement back in 1994 after my first lawyer, God rest his sneaky soul, insisted on it. Any material adverse change to the employee's compensation package shall trigger an immediate severance payout of $25 million payable within 72 business hours. At the time, it felt ridiculous. We weren't worth $25,000, let alone $25 million. But he said, Ellen, one day this company is going to get big and stupid. And when it does, you'll want to kill switch. I thought he was being dramatic. Turns out, it was just early. I read that clause again slower this time like it was an incantation. My finger traced the line where I'd initialed in blue pen just under the board chair's spidery signature. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't vague. It was a bomb with a 3-day fuse, and the bastards had just lit it. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw anything. I just closed the binder, made myself a second cup of tea, and opened Outlook. Email to Stratagrowth Legal was short. No drama, no threats, just a subject line, Clause 14D, activated. I didn't expect fireworks, but I knew this much. They'd stopped seeing me as a person. They forgot I'd helped build the foundation they now stood on. They thought I'd go quietly. They were about to learn that legacy doesn't vanish just because you stop including it in your PowerPoints and that some contracts, especially the ones written on sweat and spite, never expire. Clause 14D wasn't just words on paper. It was the quiet snarl of a forgotten god. I stared at it printed in that clunky old serif font, tucked between dusty pages of a contract no one in the new regime had ever bothered to read. The wording was perfect. Not legalese, not bloated, just surgical precision. Any material adverse action to the undersigned's compensation shall immediately trigger a severance payout of $25 million payable within 72 business hours. I chuckled, actually chuckled, the kind that sneaks out when the universe stumbles into poetic alignment. I remembered writing it with Bruce, the original company lawyer, when the office was just 4 of us and a fax machine that screamed like a demon every time it worked. He'd said, "You're going to get screwed someday, Ellen. Might as well make sure they pay you for it." We were laughing then, drunk on cheap scotch and the smell of new drywall. I never thought I'd actually use the thing. Honestly, I'd forgotten it existed until HR decided I was worth more as a line item than a human being. Clause wasn't tucked in a side addendum or one of those nebulous subject to board approval bullshit riders. It was right there, page 19, and it was never struck out, never replaced because nobody ever thought the quiet woman with the tea-stained blouses in the Alpine collection would pull the pin. But I did with all the fire of a bored librarian filing overdue fines in the middle of a riot. I scanned the page, took a screenshot, attached the original PDF we did notarized back in 2001, then typed a short note to my lawyer, Charles Rayner, still on retainer after all these years. Subject line, Clause 14D. Just checking. That was it. 5 minutes of my time. I closed the email and went about my day, watered the peace lily, cleared my inbox, helped rewrite a client brief some hotshot PM had butchered with a thesaurus addiction. Just another Tuesday. Except this Tuesday had a nuke hiding behind my ceramic mug. Charles called me 3 hours later. Ellen, he said. Voice like gravel in a leather pouch. That clause is still very, very active. There's no rescission notice, no amendment. And since you never converted your founder's agreement into the new executive comp package, they're screwed. I could hear him smiling through the phone. The kind of smile that comes with invoiceable hours and someone else's panic. I didn't smile back. Not yet. Good to know, I said. Let's keep it quiet for now. I just wanted confirmation. He hesitated. Do you want to send formal notice? Not yet, I said, sipping my now cold tea. They need a chance to insult me first. Makes the paperwork taste better. He laughed. You always were the calmest grenade in the room. Damn right I was. I hung up, opened a fresh file on my laptop, and started organizing the digital paper trail. Old board minutes, original offer letter, emails confirming my status over the years, every little breadcrumb that would prove they'd never voided my rights. It wasn't a revenge plan. It wasn't some grand heist. It was just a woman checking the lock on a door she built 30 years ago and finding out the bolt still held. The thing about corporate amnesia is that it's contagious. New blood comes in, gets high on buzzwords and quarterly targets, and forgets how the floors got laid. I think loyalty expires with the version of Excel they use. They forget that some of us didn't just work here. We are here, woven into the goddamn drywall. So I sat back, document window open, clause highlighted. They've made the first move. My job now, honor the contract. They wanted to cut costs. Let's see how sharp their scissors really were. Subject line, Clause 14D. Activation message body as discussed. To the recent freeze on my pension benefits, Ref HR 456B, I am invoking Clause 14D of my Founders Agreement. Please confirm payout timeline and point of contact for wire details. EC, I proofread it twice. No exclamation points. No capital letters. No threats. Just the kind of email that tastes like static, quiet, dull, and laced with high voltage consequences. Hit send and watch the message vanish into the same system that had just tried to erase my legacy. Then I took a breath, finished my chamomile, and walked into the Tuesday strategy meeting like nothing had happened. The room was full of the usual suspects, Tyler with his undercooked MBA smirk, Zoe pretending her rebrand presentation wasn't co-posted from a consulting deck, and Brent, our CFO, clacking his pen like he thought it made him sound authoritative. I sat in my usual seat, didn't speak, didn't even open my laptop, just observed. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Brent C.B. Collins at Stratagrowth.com. Ellen. Clause 14D is from a legacy doc and was superseded in the 2014 comp restructuring. Legal agrees it's not enforceable. We're not processing that. Best, Brent, best. That little bastard ended a multi-million-dollar denial with best. He stared at the screen so long my tea went tepid. He just dismissed a 30-year contract like it was a calendar invite glitch. I didn't reply. Brent was the type who treated people like errant spreadsheets, easy to close, annoying to reopen. But here's the thing. I never signed the 2014 comp restructure. They'd sent it, I'd reviewed it, and I'd returned it with one note. Original founder status unchanged. Will retain standing agreement. They filed it, had the email confirmation. And now someone on their legal team was about to discover exactly how airtight my paper trail was. Enter Madeline, junior associate, fresh out of Northwestern, probably still paying off her student loans. She replied to Brent's email chain, CCing me, probably by accident, with a short, hesitant note. Madeline Lopez at Stratagrowth.com. Hi, all. Just flagging that I located a notarized version of the original founder agreement from 02-2001. Ellen's signature is present, and there's no formal rescission or override documented in subsequent comp files. Still reviewing to confirm enforceability. Will update shortly. Still reviewing. That was the sound of crack forming. By lunchtime, I'd gotten exactly one Slack ping from Zoe asking if I could take a peek at the mission statement language again. Still feels kinda boomer. I gave her a thumbs up emoji. Meanwhile, I was quietly compiling a digital folder titled Enforce 14D. Inside, PDF scans, email threads, meeting notes, and, yes, my rejection of the 2014 restructure with timestamps and delivery receipts. They wanted to pretend the clause didn't exist. Fine, I'd give them a map. By late afternoon, the mood had shifted barely. Wouldn't notice if you weren't trained in watching faces for tremors. But Brent kept glancing at his phone like it was giving him indigestion. Zoe's second urgent meeting got mysteriously cancelled. And Madeline, she didn't reply again, but someone in legal requested access to our oldest HR drive. That drive hadn't been touched in years. I know because I built it. I finished out the day as I always did, reviewed vendor contracts, approved 2 purchase orders, scheduled next week's QBR. Nobody noticed the extra glint in my eye, the subtle steel in my posture. Because when people think you're harmless, they don't see the spark under the surface. I didn't want war, didn't need revenge. I just wanted what I was owed. And if Brent and the board wanted to play dumb, then I'd let the facts scream for me. Politely, of course. Nothing. Not even a read receipt. 3 days passed, and not one person from legal or C-suite acknowledged my message. Brent, radio silent. HR, pretending their little pension freeze was a hiccup, like I wouldn't notice my retirement vaporizing mid-week. And legal? Oh, legal was doing what legal does, stalling, sweating behind NDAs, hoping if they closed their eyes long enough, I'd just retire or die quietly in the corner. They didn't understand what kind of silence they'd just purchased. It didn't escalate, didn't stomp around the office like some over-caffeinated department head demanding answers. I just documented every message, every ignored ping, every timestamp. The folder I'd started in Force 14D was now color-coded, indexed, and mirrored to a private cloud server I'd had since the Yahoo era. Nothing dramatic, just a slow tightening of the noose. Professional, quiet, surgical. Then the static started. Vendor reps canceled next quarter's partnership calls. One of them, a guy named Mitch I'd known since fax machines were still a thing, left me a voicemail, said they'd heard rumblings of instability, and were reassessing risk exposure. Mitch doesn't use words like exposure unless he smells smoke. And for Stratagrowth, that smoke was starting to seep under the doors. At 7:42 p.m. that night, I got CC'd on an email by accident again. Bless Madeline. Internal counsel at Stratagrowth from Madeline L. Subject, Clause 14D verification. Follow-up her signature is present not only on the Founders Agreement, but also on the original bylaws. I've compared them against the digitized archive and the hard copy vault scans. No override has been executed. No board amendment rescinds the clause, and her rejection of the 2014 comp package is acknowledged and time-stamped in legal's inbox. Clause is active. That clause is active. It hit like a siren behind closed doors. Not for me. I'd known it was active since the second I took that binder off the fridge. But now they knew, and the longer they said nothing, the more radioactive it became. I began assembling the final dossier. Not for court, not yet, just preparedness. Board minutes from the 2001 approval meeting, check. Original offer letter from July 1994, check. Email chain rejecting the 2014 package, check. Notarized hard copy of the clause, including signature match from the internal registry, check. Even a photo of the original framed newspaper clipping, Stratagrowth Secure Series A. Founders Ellen Carter and David Lind lead the charge. My name was printed in ink before most of the current leadership even had LinkedIn accounts. I saved it all to an encrypted drive, then printed a physical binder copy just in case someone got stupid and tried to accidentally delete shared folders again. This wasn't paranoia, it was protocol. You don't survive 3 recessions, 2 hostile takeovers, and the Silicon Valley ego complex without learning to expect cowardice wrapped in a polo shirt. Meanwhile, at the office, nothing looked different. Zoe's still spitballing synergy ideas like a wind-up pitch deck. Brent's still sipping green juice and calling it a reset. If you listened close, you could hear it. The tightening, an executive assistant whispering in the hallway, a rescheduled board audit meeting with no reason given, security clearance changes on internal doc access logs, a few sudden our office messages from the same clump of directors who champion the pension freeze. None of them spoke to me directly, but I felt their eyes lingering in meetings. The way they avoided my gaze, not out of malice or fear they'd see themselves reflected in it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even insulted anymore. I was focused. They thought they were playing defense. They didn't realize I'd stopped playing altogether. I was simply aligning dominoes, and gravity was on my side. The call was supposed to be routine, one of those glossy finance briefings where executives assure investors that everything's under control while tap dancing around a dumpster fire. I joined in mute as I often did. Camera off, name label just E. Carter, wedged between half a dozen acronyms and guys named Brett with too many vowels in their last names. Brent, our CFO, kicked things off with a signature smug calm, the kind that made you want to throw a stapler through a window. We've identified and resolved a minor contractual inquiry regarding a legacy executive agreement, he said. Minor, like a paper cut. It posed no material risk and has been internally addressed. That was rich, considering I hadn't received so much as a calendar invite, let alone a response to my last email. But then came the spin. Our liabilities remain well within projection. The leadership team is committed to fiscal clarity and minimal disruption during this transitional optimization phase. They were tap dancing barefoot across a minefield. Every syllable reeked of someone trying to outrun a clause they hadn't bothered to read. I didn't speak, didn't even flinch. I just jotted down a few notes, time-stamped the call, and saved the recording. 12 hours later, my lawyer called. Ellen, he said, voice unusually tight. You're gonna want to see what just came in. It was an anonymous tip. A whistleblower leak funneled discreetly through his firm's encrypted intake portal. No attachments, just a screenshot, an internal Stratagrowth legal email. Short, brutal from Brent C. Legal review team subject, Clause 14D let her push it. She's too old to fight this in court. We stall her out. She'll cave or croak. Either way, we win. I stared at that line until the screen blurred. Too old to fight this. I've been called many things in my life: tenacious, reserved, intimidatingly composed, but this was the first time someone had tried to weaponize my years against me like they were a weakness. As if 3 decades of keeping this company upright through crises, lawsuits, staff walkouts, and economic implosions were just an expiration date. I didn't shake. I didn't slam anything. But the shift inside me was tectonic, cold, permanent. I opened Outlook and began drafting. 2. Board at Stratagrowth. Subject. Clause 14D. Whistleblower evidence attached. Dear Board. Please find attached a screenshot of internal communication from your CFO, which was submitted to my legal representation via a whistleblower protocol. The message in question explicitly details your executive team's awareness of the contractual validity of Clause 14D as well as an active strategy to obstruct and delay lawful payout based on my age. As a reminder, Clause 14D was confirmed as enforceable by independent counsel and remains unamended and in effect. Its correspondence represents not only a breach of internal ethical conduct, but a documented attempt to suppress legal obligation via age-based discrimination. Please confirm wire transfer instructions and timeline by Friday, Cobb. Failure to respond will result in immediate filing of injunctive relief, interest accrual activation, and notification of your financial institution and compliance officer. Regards, Ellen Carter, founding partner. Stratagrowth Incorporated. I hit send. This wasn't negotiation anymore. This wasn't diplomacy. This was enforcement. By Thursday, I noticed Brent had cleared his calendar for the week. Legal stopped replying to routine messages. The finance Slack channels turned into ghost towns. One director's assistant emailed me directly asking if I'd be attending next quarter's strategic offsite, responded with a single sentence. That will depend entirely on your compliance with your own bylaws. And now they weren't just ignoring me. They were afraid of me. Good. Let 'em sweat. Let 'em pace through conference rooms whispering legal hypotheticals that all ended the same way with my name on a 7-figure wire. I wasn't bluffing. I was boiling, cold and slow, the kind of anger that doesn't shout but burns through marble. By Friday morning, Storm was foaming at the edges of their glass tower. I knew things had gone critical when the usual legal foot-draggers stopped replying altogether. Not even a received, reviewing internally canned response. Just radio silence, which in legalese means panic sweat. The kind that stains, wool suits, and gets billed at $900 an hour. Brent was nowhere. Gone. No Slack presence. No calendar entries. No sign-ins on the access logs. It was as if someone had yanked his cord mid-presentation and shoved him into a non-disclosure dungeon with bottled water and 2 lawyers whispering damage control. They'd escalated to external counsel by then, some high-dollar firm out of New York that specializes in crisis containment, the kind of people who refer to whistleblowers as information leaks and believe NDAs are spiritual doctrine. But even they couldn't magic their way out of Clause 14D. Was too specific, too narrow. It didn't give room to interpret or stall. The penalty wasn't subject to arbitration. It wasn't to be reviewed by a compensation committee. It simply was. The clause was an axe tied to a tripwire, and they tripped it while blindfolded, drunk on their own austerity metrics. When their lawyers finally acknowledged me, it was through a bloated email stuffed with conditional language and posturing. We dispute the material applicability of Clause 14D and assert that its invocation lacks contemporaneous justification. I didn't even finish reading. My lawyer did, and his reply was only 5 words. Injunction request filed. Clock running. That same day, our internal server logs were subpoenaed. Every HR email, every legal draft, every Slack thread with the words freeze, retire, or too old was now flagged and replicating in a compliance vault faster than Brent could delete his browser history. I heard the word cost-cutting had become untouchable, like saying Voldemort at Hogwarts. Entire fiscal decks were being rewritten just to avoid triggering compliance protocols. Then came the investors. A legacy fund partner, Harold Stinson, white hair, ugly ties, and a handshake like warm concrete, cornered me in the elevator. "Ellen," he said, clearing his throat like someone about to start a war. "Is it true what I'm hearing? About a clause? A penalty?" I didn't blink, just tilted my head slightly and smiled the way you do when someone asks a question they already know the answer to. Harold stared for a long moment, then he stepped off the elevator. Word spreads fast when old money gets nervous. Meanwhile, Brent tried one last desperate maneuver, filed a motion internally to have the clause reviewed under good faith negotiation rules. Basically, a bureaucratic Hail Mary. If they could prove I was acting in bad faith, they might delay the penalty until arbitration. My lawyer filed the injunction the same hour. The court's response came in swift and clean. Denied. Clause active. Payment required. Interest now accruing. The dominoes were falling so fast you could hear the wind between them. I didn't celebrate, clink glasses, or call anyone. Instead, I opened the company dashboard, the one I still had quiet admin access to, thanks to a permission tree no one had ever thought to update, and watched a meeting titled Emergency Compliance Review. Investor briefing appear in Brent's calendar. 30 minutes blocked off. No guests invited. Only one attachment. Contingency wire scenarios. That was when I knew. They weren't looking for a way out anymore. were looking for a way to survive what was already coming. And me, I was still entirely still. Like a lighthouse in a hurricane, no longer warning ships away, just watching them crash one by one. For 30 years, I'd been the quiet solution, the backstage hand pulling every crisis back from the edge. But now I wasn't pulling. Let them fall. Friday came like a ticking bomb in a linen envelope. No fireworks. No grand apology. Just the absence of a wire that should have landed by noon. 12:01 p.m., my phone didn't buzz. +1 217, my bank app showed no new deposits. By 12:30, it was over. The window had closed. 72 business hours from initial notification as outlined in Clause 14D, they'd missed it. Whether out of arrogance, panic, or sheer stupidity, they'd let the clock run dry, and with it, activated the clause's next paragraph, one they definitely hadn't read. Interest accrual, 3.2% per business day, automatic escalation to default status. Notice to third-party fiduciaries, banking partners triggered, insurance review clauses kicked in, and the best part, my attorney didn't even have to lift a finger. It all happened the moment his notice hit send. At 1:04 p.m., forwarded me the email. Subject, Legal Default Clause, 14D Penalty Enforcement to Strata Growth Legal CC, Compliance Officers, Treasury Liaison, External Counsel as of COB today, Strata Growth Incorporated, is in legal default of Clause 14D of Miss Ellen Carter's Founder Agreement. The payment window has expired without wire receipt or approved extension. As such, all contractual penalties are now in effect, including compound interest clauses, fiduciary escalation, and immediate creditor notification. Please refer to the attached enforcement summary for next steps. Simple, clinical, devastating. Within an hour, I heard the first scream, not literal, but the kind that travels across buildings through missed meetings, panicked messages, and frantic badge swipes. CFO Brent Collins resigned by 3:15 p.m. The company email was a short internal announcement. 2 paragraphs, 1 lie. After careful consideration and with deep gratitude, we announced the departure of Brent Collins, who is stepping away for personal reasons. Brent has been an instrumental part of our journey and leaves behind a legacy of growth and innovation. Legacy of growth. Cute. The only thing he left behind was a crater the size of our entire liquidity pool. Word spread like a gas leak. Slack channels went dark. Compliance started mass restricting document access. IT locked down all cloud drives between finance, legal, and operations, standard protocol when external litigation is imminent. From my end, it was quiet. I sat in my kitchen watching steam curl from my tea like a ghost stretching its limbs. The birds were out. Little gray wrens bouncing along the feeder I'd meant to refill. Neighbor was mowing his lawn with a lopsided pushmower that squealed on every third rotation. It was a normal afternoon, perfectly mundane, except for the fact that a Fortune 500 was hemorrhaging itself to death in a boardroom 30 floors above an artisanal salad bar. I didn't feel vindicated, not yet, but I felt still. The kind of stillness you get after storm flattens the air. My lawyer texted once more that day, just one sentence. They've started calling the banks. I didn't reply. Instead, I stirred my tea again slowly, deliberately, as if each circle in the mug was erasing a decade of erasure. Every time they talked over me in meetings, every time they handed my insights to someone younger, flashier, more disruptive, every time they asked if I'd considered retiring to spend more time with family as if I hadn't spent 30 years babysitting their messes, they called it cost-cutting. They called it a reckoning with interest. The fire didn't start with a bang. It started with a number. On Monday morning, Strata Growth's credit line, $80 million of sweet liquidity, was quietly frozen by the bank. No email, no negotiation. Just a triggered clause buried deep in their lending agreement. Any breach of material internal contract resulting in payout over $10 million shall result in immediate risk reassessment. Breach $25 meters. By noon, a ripple turned tidal. Payment processing slowed. Vendor invoices bounced. Payroll approvals delayed. Someone in finance tried to initiate a standard ACH transfer and got hit with a transaction unavailable flag. Word spread like wildfire in a locked office. By 2 p.m., an emergency board meeting was in motion. I knew because 3 members were scheduled investor calls back-to-back, citing urgent realignment. Translation: they were scrambling to explain why a legacy agreement signed in the Bush SR. era had just sucker-punched their quarterly forecast off a cliff. By Tuesday, the vultures arrived. Business Insider ran a headline. Founding clause costs Strata Growth $25 meters pension freeze sparks legal meltdown. Then Bloomberg picked it up. Hidden clause, visible consequences, Strata Growth, CFO fallout, and the $25 meters blunder. And my favorite, Fortune, she didn't yell. She just collected. They all requested interviews. 6 journalists, 3 podcast producers, 1 guy from a finance YouTube channel who offered to do a dramatic reading of the clause. I declined every single one. My only public statement issued through my lawyer and posted in 12 Times New Roman on a white background. I did not sue. I did not threaten. I enforced what they agreed to. Ellen Carter nothing more because the truth didn't need decoration. By Wednesday, Stratagrowth stock slid like oil on tile, down 18% in 5 trading days. The board tried to halt the bleeding with a press release about operational recalibration and temporary resource consolidation. Translation: layoffs. 57 employees got calls that week. Some of them I knew. Good people. People who kept their heads down and did the work while execs played musical chairs with efficiency initiatives. They didn't deserve it, but that's the nature of corporate combustion. It burns everyone, even the ones holding water. They didn't mention my name in the layoff memos, but every hallway whisper traced back to me. Ellen's clause? Ellen's penalty? Ellen's bomb. I wasn't gloating. There was no thrill in it. No fist-pumping triumph. Just a deep, full-bellied stillness. Like, the air after a backdraft sucks the oxygen out of a room and leaves behind silence and ash. I spent that week doing normal things: grocery shopping, watering the ferns, fixing a leaky faucet the super had been ignoring. The world outside still turned. Kids left. Dogs barked. Life carried on. Meanwhile, inside Stratagrowth, the architecture trembled under the weight of its own arrogance. At night, I sat by the window with my notebook. No TV, just a pen and the soft rhythm of a rocking chair. On one page, I wrote, "They wanted me quiet." I gave them contractual compliance. They wanted legacy without liability, history without memory, a spine without a voice. Well, they got a lesson in remembering, and the ledger wasn't done balancing just yet. Monday, 9:06 a.m. The deposit hit like the quietest earthquake in banking history. One line buried in a sea of routine statements. Incoming wire $25 million REF. Stratagrowth Settlement Clause 14D. No calls, no follow-up, just digits. Unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely earned. My attorney confirmed the wire by 9/11. His message was short, almost amused. It cleared, and then some. A few minutes later, the new CFO, some internal puppet named Jeremy, who'd been sitting 2 levels below Brent just a month prior, sent me a grovel-thin email. Subject: wire confirmation and apology on behalf of Stratagrowth. Dear Ms. Carter, please accept this confirmation of the full severance payout in accordance with Clause 14D of your Founders Agreement along with the accrued interest and legal fees as stipulated. On behalf of Stratagrowth, I sincerely regret the oversight and the circumstances that led us here. Your contribution to this company's legacy is immeasurable. Warm regards, Jeremy L. Hartman, Chief Financial Officer, Acting. Warm regards. They always reach for warmth when the check clears. I didn't reply. What was there to say? My signature was already stamped in the infrastructure of that company, in the original source code, in the crisis protocols, the policy manuals, they'd renamed but never rewritten. I was Stratagrowth. They'd just forgotten till it cost them everything. I left the house that afternoon with no fanfare, just a small duffel bag, my notebook, and a thermos of black tea. Drove 6 hours upstate to a lakeside cabin I bought years ago and never told a soul about. No signal, no inbox, no headlines. I lit the fireplace, sat on the deck. The wind slapped the corners of my face raw while the lake glittered like cold glass. In my lap, a leather notebook I'd been writing in since the first HR meeting where I realized I was becoming invisible. Stamped on the cover in worn gold letters, lessons they forgot. I flipped past pages filled with little observations, warnings, old quotes, boardroom missteps, names underlined in red, a list of every VP who mistook my silence for surrender. On the last page, I wrote just one thing. They built the company on my back. I left with what I was owed, no more, no less. I closed the notebook. The storm was over, and they would remember me not because I burned it all down, but because I never had to raise my voice to make the walls collapse. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.